Hello, fellow watchers and enjoyers. Ash here to record a cheeky little video to fill in a bit of a gap in one of the videos we recorded that I didn't feel like actually came out too well. It was another one of the kind of ranty Reddit videos, and we recently had a bit of like clarity to go. Is that really what we want to be putting out on a daily basis? Like, do we really just want to be saying like, aha, gotcha, Reddit comment that I don't agree with? And the answer is no. So I'm gonna take a look at a article written by Michael Adams and Maisie Spackman. I remember Maisie's name is familiar. I believe she reported on the Bianca stuff, but don't quote me on that. I could be entirely wrong. But two big writers who have done some research to, like, kind of rank the most complained about soap moments of all time. Obviously, this is a thing where Ofcom's been around for a good set of years, but ultimately, it's only, during a set time. Like, I doubt you're doing it much in the 80s, I doubt you're doing it much in the 90s, but, in, like, early 2010s, it would probably make sense. But, yeah, so we're just going to go through them. I suppose I'll just throw in this, I'll throw in this little storyline as well, just to get some fucking thoughts over it, because I'm not really covering Coronation Street. But, yeah. There was a Coronation Street storyline, which was just announced, which is going to be... It suggested that Toya Battersby... It's going to be a story that obviously deals with rape and baby loss, so that's the trigger warning. So Toya Battersby was a character who was sexually assaulted back in around 2001. And now we're kind of changing history by suggesting now that she became pregnant after the attack and the baby was stillborn, so she buried a baby in a park. This one is it's a questionable one. It's a very odd one right there, and I can already imagine it receiving a lot of criticism because, well, that's a very hard sell for anyone. It is a very hard sell, and I don't know. I don't even feel particularly comfortable about it. Like, maybe it'll be groundbreaking and really good, but like the buy-in for the viewer is quite difficult. But all right, now let's go through the list of the most complained about soap moments of all time. I think we'll go least complained about on this list till most, and then obviously we can build up to the final one, which most EastEnders fans can probably imagine what it's gonna be. Alright, let's get to the bottom here. Okay. 52 people complain as Billy and Paul reignite their sex life following Paul's motor neurone disease diagnosis. This was seen that Billy and Paul were obviously they are gay and they were in a bath together, and yeah, it was a slightly questionable attempt. Because, he was struggling, because now it's been suggested that there will be a time where Paul's MND will mean that he's not able to speak. And Billy said that they should try to record the things that the specialist had said, but Paul interrupted him with a kiss, saying he's too busy living life to the full. After a romantic afternoon on the sofa, Billy and Paul read through the book they'd been given before reflecting on the reignited passion of their sex life. Yeah, so I guess it's a very taboo. It's a very Corey way of doing anything, and probably not what I'd necessarily suggest to anyone. But I don't know. It was a nice way to keep the relationship somewhat high. But I suppose even with this kind of set up this really funny scene afterwards, where obviously Todd and Ed, the builder, had to come in and try fucking break it up and try and make it okay. So it was it was good fun, honestly. It was a decent attempt, I will say. So that had 52 people complain. Next up, another Coronation Street one, being Liam threatened with a knife. This was a part of a big bullying storyline where... Actually, no, I suppose I forgot to say, and at the end I'll be giving, like, the fucking reasonable. Like, is it reasonable, is it not? I don't know, like, I suppose it's just generally trying to figure out why I think people would complain. And I might be wrong, because it's just my opinion. And I'm not, like, the fucking arbiter of truth, but... I think if people are complaining at the M&D stuff, it's a bit of a questionable thing, but I enjoyed, it was a nice way to keep the romance alive, and it was cool. It was a decent set. I don't know why people have complained about it. It was just a funny little set piece. Alright, Liam threatened with a knife, 135 complaints. This was a story where Liam Connor, Maria Connor's son, has been threatened with a little fucking karambit knife, which is funny because I play CSGO and the karambits are just silly. But essentially, in this scene, he's been getting bullied in person and bullied online, and it escalated to Mason holding, I think it's actually called a zombie knife, which I don't actually know what it is. What's that term? It's just, I think it's a karambit, but yeah, could be a zombie knife, regardless. But yeah, and this sparked upset because obviously they tackled with a fairly young kid, Liam Connor being like 12, 13. I don't remember how old he is at this point, but fairly young, and about 13, 14. Maybe even 15, roughly. But he did genuinely, like, contemplate, like, suicide. So, yeah, it's a rough one, that. I can understand when people complained it's a bit much, and it's something that's pretty horrific. Nobody really wants to see kids with knives. So, I think this one's reasonable. I think this gets the reasonable award. Next up is another Coronation Street one. Fuck me, it's all Coronation Street ones, apparently. Well, to see us bloody EastEnders fans, we just don't complain. Yeah, we do. We all do. We're allowed to complain. It's what we're here for. Racism in Coronation Street, 139 complaints. This was for an event where a man called Darian was a young asylum seeker who was the victim of a racially motivated attack. And this was a part of a storyline where Max Platt, I guess, he might be I don't remember. But regardless, David's like adoptive son and Kylie's kid. And he was being groomed to be in a right-wing extremist group that were, hated minorities and essentially all of the bad radicalized, like, here's why we are oppressed. And it's like, that's not the problem though, is it? That's not the problem. But yeah, Darren got attacked. And when confronted by Alia, Max defended his new friends, claiming that they're not racist and they didn't have anything to do with the attack. Spoiler alert, they did have something to do. Oh, it's Max Turner. They did have something to do with the attack. But I think it's one of those things where I don't necessarily... Obviously, some people may want to be ignorant to it, rather. But ultimately, I think it's a worthwhile enough cause to not kind of kick up that much of a fuss about it. So I appreciate the complaints, but I also believe that soaps at the core always need to tackle some of this more serious stuff. Like, I don't think we can just fucking ignore some of the bad stuff. And some people may not like it as much, but ultimately, like, I don't know, I mean, soap as a form tends to help people realize what they're actually in. Like, for some people who may be terminally online or people who may not see the most of the world, it does help educate some people on some issues that they may not know. And obviously everybody knows what racism is, but it's important to still show that there are, kids being brainwashed in this instance, or there is still like extremist groups who believe that people shouldn't be there because of like who they are or where they were born. It's ridiculous, and their culture. So I understand the complaints, though. It's always hard to see some genuine acts of racism. It always is generally disgusting. I just once again hope it's for the right reasons and not for the other reasons. Next up, we have David Platt's rape, which got 183 complaints. Now I'll stop using the word as much as I can, just to avoid all of the upset. But I understand the complaints about this, but I will say this storyline was a phenomenal storyline. This happened in 2018, where Coronation Street aired their first male sexual assault storyline, where David Platt was kind of friends with this guy who just like come to the cobbles, and he was this like PT, and he was very interesting, and but he started to become mates with him, and then one night after drinking, Josh slipped some THC is the fucking what's how do I search for that whilst not being put on a fucking list? THC? Isn't that the one from weed? God damn it. Like, I don't want to search it. I'll be put on a fucking list, boys. But he'd slipped in a drug into his drink, and regardless, it doesn't actually. I hope someone actually covers it fully, because it'd be where is it? GHB. There we are. Sorry. GHB, which, knocks people out, but you're still, the way they told it is you're still kind of present, but you just can't move, and it just stuns you, essentially. And it was pretty horrific to see. How it was done is, he carried David to his bedroom, unbuckled his, David, like, clearly out of it, and, like, took his belt off, and the rest is implied. And one of those storylines where, because it was done by David Platt, who for the most part is like the fucking snarky, not very serious, always cracking one-liners story, and it was him, like, once again getting the really sensitive stuff. He is a fantastic actor when he needs to be. It's just they usually don't give him the huge storylines. So this one got 183 complaints. I think it was a very important one. I can understand why people were upset, because it was a fairly big deal in terms of how they showed it. But fundamentally, it wasn't the most graphic portrayal. It wasn't, like, it was all mostly implied. So it wasn't like, yeah, sure, it was horrific, but at least the viewership were saved. Like, at least it wasn't ultra realistic and disgusting in a way. Like, we were saved that. And the storyline was probably one of my favorite Coronation Street storylines ever. It was really well done, and then it coincided with the Ada Maguire suicide story, where David kind of went, well, yeah, that could have been me. So I just think that it was a very, I can understand the complaints because it is very graphic and very absurd, but I will respect that they did a really good job with it nonetheless. I suppose this was somehow, between this and starting to watch some of it in 2020, this was one of the storylines that I managed to watch a bunch of, and it got me into Coronation Street. Which is, a fucking achievement. Love Coronation. Well, I don't exactly love it now, but I do yeah, I love what I've seen of it, and I've watched a lot of it at this point. 193 complaints. EastEnders portrayal of social workers. This was when Linda was framed for drunk driving by Janine, and this took a hit simply because there were a bunch of angry social workers like, what do you fucking mean that social workers would do this? They wouldn't. They're not just trying to take away kids from their mum, for fuck's sake. Like, come on, man. Jesus Christ, it's light over there. I look like the fucking arbiter of chaos. I am the judge, jury, and the executioner. I am the light of justice. That's fucking wanky. How much more do we have? We are... Okay, well, there's still a decent chunk to go, so... But so far, I will say, I've not seen anything that was extremely fucking bad. Apparently, the next one is Evelyn Plummer's therapy comments, which was her essentially saying, the context isn't necessarily here. It was during episode in 2021, they made some comments about play therapy that shocked viewers. What is play therapy? I need to educate myself. Oh, so it's like play therapy is kind of they play and use art materials, and it's an artistic expression, I guess. So they get to be a kid, and it allows them to kind of open up and kind of figure out how they're feeling. All right. Just saying, she had play therapy, touchy-feely rubbish, new age, but she needs something long-term, teach her right from wrong. This would have been about Hope, who was constantly struggling and was an arsonist at a young age somehow. That was interesting. And yeah, it's just a wild one, honestly. Got 275 complaints. I mean, I guess I respect the idea. I can appreciate the idea, but not really a huge fucking thing to me. It doesn't really stick out. This next one is, I do understand the complaint. I do understand the complaints. This is a storyline that happened kind of like 2019, 2020, where Jeff Metcalf and Yasmin's like coercive, controlling abuse storyline, where Jeff slowly very quickly wormed his way into Yasmin's life and controlled her in every way, convinced her she was an alcoholic, and just completely broke her down and broke down all of the barriers and tried to mold her in his own image. In this storyline, I think it was because she didn't like let him cook, he decided to make her a meal because he felt inadequate, and he proceeded to, Yasmina's pet chickens, and they had a chicken dinner. So Jeff cooked and killed Yasmin's chicken, who, they are pets. Yasmin doesn't have any other pets. Those are her pets. Those who she cares for. And when she got disgusted and I think threw it on the floor, he made her get on her hands and knees and like eat it, and maybe not eat all of it, just eat some of it and clean it up. Like, this one so far is probably up there in terms of the amount of complaints that I feel like it should have. This one so far is the one that probably so far has upset me the most. Alright, next up, we're back to EastEnders with this one, and it is Ben's rape. This in 2022, where obviously Ben was sexually assaulted by Lewis Butler, and this had 353 complaints. And I will say I can understand the complaints, as I'm pretty sure this will... I don't actually know, so I won't... I can't imagine it was on after the watershed. Oh, however phrasing that works, leave me alone. don't believe it was like pre-Watershed, so that would make more sense. So, and how this storyline was portrayed was quite graphic in a sense. We got to see everything up till the act. We got to see the build up to it. We got to see Ben's response to it, and we got to see, it was very vivid and very expressive with how they told it. So, some people don't want to watch their soap for something so horrific as this storyline, and I can understand why people complain. Yeah, it was pre-Watershed. I will say they did a good job of portraying this as, Lewis seemed to gain a couple of friends and a couple of interests out there. But essentially he, it was there for about a month. He got close to Ben and kind of started flirting with him. He said no, and then, yeah. And then it turned out that Lewis was a serial offender, and yeah, it was I can understand the complaints, though. It was very open and very kind of, it was very out there as such. It's very out there. So I will respect the complaints. I'll say that much. Next up, we have an acid attack on the Dales and in the Cobbles, so basically both Emmerdale and Coronation Street, where in 2018 Ross Barton became a victim of an acid attack. A drug dealer threw acid in his face, and he was scarred up the side of his head. And it says that people were concerned that children may have seen a violent scene, as it was also pre-Watershed. And I'll be real, I didn't watch any of this acid attack storyline in Emmerdale, but I did watch it when it came over to Coronation Street, where after about 6 to 9 months of relentless stalking of Daisy, on her wedding day, the stalker proceeded to want to disfigure Daisy and throw it in her face, but Ryan stepped in the way and kind of took the acid for her, and obviously Ryan's still scarred up now, and this would end up being a weird love story in a sense, where they would eventually fall in love with each other because of their trauma, which was, I enjoyed it personally, probably not the most reasonable storyline out there, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. So that was 438 viewers total, 366 in Emmerdale and 72 in Coronation Street. Next up, we have oh boy. I will just say these storylines are all controversial, so I think it's important to know. It's important to know that, these will be controversial storylines. No one's getting angry at the price of milk or whatever and complain. I mean, some people would, but some people know the pothole fucking hotline, so. You never know. Some people like doing some things. In 2020, Emmerdale had a controversial story in which Laura Thomas and Jay Sharma decided to abort their baby after discovering it had Down syndrome. When the storyline was announced, fans were up in arms, and Ofcom received hundreds of complaints before the story had even aired. Following the broadcast, the storyline had received a total of 447 complaints from outraged viewers. On top of the official complaints, a petition asking for Emmerdale to drop the storyline reached over 30,000 signatures. Yeah, that's and the Laura Shaw defends the story, saying, "We're confident that we produced has been done in a really balanced and sensitive way. We haven't gone into this blindly, and we've spoken to as many people as we possibly can. We got the research, it's based on real life, and I think people will see that. You're going to feel uncomfortable at times watching it, but I hope that people will then, as they watch it, understand why we've done it." Yeah, I mean, soap's all about tackling, taboo and taking these storylines on. And I think they've done a good job of like I said, I've not seen this storyline, so I can't comment on if I thought it was a good job or it was on the nose or a bit too much. So, soaps are supposed to tackle difficult decisions, and they're supposed to, you're not always going to believe what the soap's telling you. You're not always going to like what the soap's saying, but ultimately they have a job to tell a story in its fullest. And, I'm sure it's a decision parents have had to face. So you've got to just fucking, you just have to deal with it, really. But yeah, sorry, I'm getting distracted by a bunch of clickbait articles, my bad. But yeah, so to fully round it out, soaps have to portray issues you may not believe in or agree with, but ultimately they are still characters, and some characters do some dodgy shit. And I'd say it's probably a reasonable 447 complaints. Once again, not that I'm the arbiter of fucking virtue or anything, but it probably did deserve a decent chunk of complaints because, sometimes a decision comes from left field and still is quite heart-wrenching in a way. Yeah, next up, Emmerdale dog napping, 448 complaints. The soaps are often airing scenes of kidnapping, sieges, and hostage situations, but it seems that viewers draw the line when it comes to dog napping. Viewers are horrified by scenes in 2016 that saw Charity Dingle and Ross Barton discussing a plan to make money by holding a dog for ransom. It sounds funny, but also it sounds fucked. The story received 448 complaints from viewers who are concerned that the scenes may inspire people to commit similar crimes in real life. However, Ofcom dropped the investigation with a spokesperson explaining. They received a number of complaints about the risk that a storyline involving an attempted theft of a dog could encourage similar behaviour. We found that the scenes were not likely to condone or encourage people to attempt dog theft, taking into account the dramatic context and the characters were clearly not role models. It was clear to viewers they were behaving in a morally questionable manner, and the attempt to capture a dog failed. Yeah. I can understand why people get upset because, well, I mean, it's just generally a rule. You don't fuck with animals, honestly. It's always a bad idea when that happens, but as long as they clearly didn't go through with it, so it must be something a bit more, I don't know, it's just not that serious, I guess. Next up, we have Phelan's double murder. There's 541 complaints. Now, this one is from Coronation Street, and I was watching this at the time. Well, not at the time, but I watched it afterwards. But yeah, Patrick Phelan was a unrivaled piece of shit and continued to fucking. He did a lot of bad stuff. He's actually assaulted Anna Windass. He shot his daughter Nicola. He killed 3 or 4 men. Or 3 or 4 people, rather. Pat Phelan. Let me just double check this one. Where is the... Man, usually the soap articles have like a killers thing. But yeah, he kind of went back and forth. He killed at least 4 or 5 people. He killed Luke. He killed Andy. He killed Vinny, who was his henchman. Is there any else? I don't know. But yeah, he essentially kind of developed into a more... I mean, he was a murderer. He was a murderer and he's a terrible person. Point being, I don't need to dwell on this for too long. Video's already long enough. What people are upset about is Phelan was keeping a man called Andy, he was keeping him hostage. and he was keeping him in like a basement or a cellar for half a year. And he then made Phelan shoot his own henchman, who I believe was called Vinny. He made him shoot Vinny, and then he thought, okay, and he was traumatized. He was fucking, frantically crying and just, absolutely traumatized with this. And he made him shoot him, and in the end, Andy shot him, and then he shot Andy, just pretty much directly after. He let him reel with all the consequences, and proceeded to fucking just in cold blood just murder him. And yeah, oh boy. It's oof. It was a pretty rough story. I can understand why people complained about it. It was far too brutal for Coronation Street at the time, but I will say it did do a good job of building up Phelan to be a horrific monster who needed to die or get locked up. It was probably the last great Coronation Street killer, in my opinion. People are saying, I think you were saying this was all implied, and this was a lot of it was implied. It was pretty fucking sad, but we'll say that it wasn't it wasn't as vicious as it could. It was all implied, so that's the main issue. But this had 541 complaints, understandable, and I respect it. Next up, we have Karen's anti-vax rant and 684 complaints. Now, this is obviously during the COVID lockdown, and Karen Taylor seemed to have essentially, look, everybody was sad, everybody was rough during lockdown, and EastEnders had finally come back after being taken off the air for several months. The last thing people wanted was someone complaining about, being anti-vaccine. Or just facts. I don't think anybody wanted it in general, Didn't want to be rabbited to. We'd all spent a fucking rough period of time stuck indoors when most of us want to go outside. Not me, but never me. But yeah, it's not, like I said, important to have, but you can understand why people would have complained, because not the time, essentially not the time. But yeah, I think it was them trying to figure out how much to tell with it, how much can we extend the rules and still work around them, and ultimately we did just get a weird set of 2020, honestly. But yeah, the one time that EastEnders stopped for a period of time. But that had 684 comments, fairly reasonable, and I respect it. And finally, what is the most controversial storyline ever on soap, as far as we can tell, and as far as Maisie Spackleman and Michael Adams. Maisie Spackman, sorry. This storyline I have a bit more of a nuanced take on. I think that it is a... It's Ronnie's baby swap, which had 13,400 complaints. And this storyline was where Ronnie Mitchell swapped the body of her dead baby, I think it was called James, with Cat Moon's Tommy. And this did really cause some problems, and it kind of blew up in the media at the time, and it was pretty rapidly shelved, rewritten, and cut. So, and even then, Samantha Womack quit the show for a little bit, or at least exited to give Ronnie some space. I've got a bit more of a different take on this one, as does, I'm not going to say their name, but, me and another content creator have a similar opinion about this one. I think this could have been a really interesting story about how far grief can, push you into doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And I think that with the actors who were in this storyline, it could have been really well done. But, the comments are like the second most complained had a fraction of the same complaint. So I think with the amount of media outcry at the time and it kind of going into a slightly new era of the show, I think you can understand why they would have axed this, as it was absolutely horrific and a bit much. And doesn't help it was also Ronnie, Ronnie wasn't ever allowed any happiness at any time in any period of her life. But I think I don't mind the idea of having seen this storyline. I think it would always be very interesting to see the alternate world where we saw how it was done and it was done fully. But ultimately, enough outcry and anybody will change their mind. So I'm not I'm not disregarding the viewers' upset, because it's fucking absolutely probably one of the most heartbreaking storylines as a whole, and one of the most horrific things you can do. But I do lend some time to imagine if in some other reality where this was actually portrayed on screen. And I think it would have been very controversial, but I do think that they would have been able to pull it off at the time. But there we are. That is the list of the most complained about soap moments of all time, and I will say that is a reasonable complaint. As much as it would have been interesting to see, ultimately, there's only so much you can do if everybody goes, this is nobody's giving it a chance, so you may as well just get rid of it. And I think it's reasonable. And just because it would have been interesting to see it doesn't mean that it still isn't a really tall order to live up to. And I think the media would have just been just waiting for EastEnders to trip up and embarrass themselves. But there we are. Those are the most complained soap moments of all time with Ofcom complaints. Tell me what you think in the comment section down below. Are there any that you think I've missed or this article has missed? And I will just say, go ahead and read this article. It's on Metro. It's by Michael Adams and Maisie Spackman, who did all the research and the producing of this. So credit to them. And it was an interesting video. It's always fun to tackle these sorts of topics, and it's good to kind of reassess and kind of go, all right, you've been a bit... Well, I don't know. I don't feel like I've... Other than the Hollyoaks stuff, I don't feel like there's been much to kind of be a bit more serious about. So I hope that this kind of fills the void, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, there we are. So as I said before, those are the most complained about soap moments of all time. I've been Ash from Watching Walford. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join me in the next one. See you then. Bye-bye.